Everyone was now seated around a table, with Mordred now calmer from his burst of laughter, though Gilgamesh was curious that Mordred had not attacked Arteria. Using his telepathic link with her, Gilgamesh asked. "I'm surprised you don't attack her," asks Gilgamesh. Mordred looked at him and answered for the link. "I knew if I attacked you and Inkiju they would stop and contain me, and besides I was busy laughing," Mordred said with a smile. "Since when are you so smart, Mordred?" asks Gilgamesh with a smile. "Hey! What do you mean by that?" screams Mordred through the link, which Gilgamesh ignores. Gilgamesh turned his attention to Arteria, who was staring at them blankly, but he was able to make out a flash of anger in her eyes. "I think we should introduce ourselves," says Gilgamesh to Arteria, who nods her head in agreement. "Firstly that one and Mordred, but I think you already know, and beside her is Inkiju, both are servants like you," said Gilgamesh pointing to the two who were sitting beside him. Inkiju nods while Mordred doesn't care. But before Arteria could question how they had two servants there, Gilgamesh spoke. "I'll explain later how they are here," said Gilgamesh to Arteria, who agreed. Arteria managed to use her link to the Throne of Heroes to get information about Inkiju and couldn't help but be surprised. Inkiju, the weapon of the gods and Gilgamesh's best friend. Though Arteria was surprised that Gilgamesh could have friends. "And those three are Asia, Valerie, and Sabas," said Gilgamesh pointing to the two blondes who were sitting next to him and Sabas who was standing behind him. "And I am Gilgamesh, descended from the original Gilgamesh you knew," he said as he turned his gaze to Arteria. "Downward?" questions Arteria a little skeptically. "Exactly. They can prove that, and also what I'm going to tell you about," said Gilgamesh pointing to his group, who nodded. "First of all, this is a completely different world from what you know," says Gilgamesh. "A different world?" asks Arteria in surprise. "Exactly. First you must understand the multiverse theory. Multiverse is a term used to describe the hypothetical set of possible universes, including the universe in which we live. Together, these universes comprise everything that exists, the totality of space, time, matter, energy, and the laws and physical constants that describe them, explains Gilgamesh in detail and slowly for Arteria to absorb and understand. Valerie catches their eye with a fake cough. In short, they are an infinite number of universes, each one different from the others, having their own system and events, Valerie said more simply to Arteria, who nods her head. Gilgamesh grumbles a little that his explanation is better for Valerie, who laughs. "In your universe, where the age of the gods is over, where there are servants and heroic spirits as well as the Holy Grail War," said Gilgamesh to Arteria, who nodded in agreement, "this universe is different from yours. The biggest difference is that here the age of gods never ended." "What?" speaks shocked Arteria. "A world where the age of gods is still perpetuated? That should be impossible." Of course Arteria was also surprised that she was in a different world, but she's seen a lot of weird things in her life, so this part isn't all that surprising. But a world where the age of gods continues is much more shocking. "And as I said, there are different worlds, each with its own peculiarity," said Gilgamesh, giving a nod to Valerie and Sabas. Two large dragon wings emerge from Sabas's back and Valerie opens her mouth showing her fangs. Sabas is a dragonoid, a dragon that takes on human form, and Valerie is a Dhampur, a hybrid of human and vampire, explains Gilgamesh to Arteria, who nods her head. "And I'm the Gilgamesh, descendant of this world," he explains to Arteria, who nods her head as she starts to understand everything. "I'll give you a summary of this world. First of all mythologies are real in this world, Nordic, Biblical, Hindu and others. For example, the Norse gods live in Asgard, the Greeks on Mount Olympus and so on," Gilgamesh told Arteria. "The main mythology in this world is the biblical one, so to speak, meaning the angels, fallen angels, and devils." Gilgamesh reached out towards Arteria and made a hologram of magic appear in his hand with the image of a devil. Devils are beings that originated from the underworld, created by the original Lucifer, using the body of his wife Lilith, in order to create a military force to destroy God and the angels and fulfill his personal ambition for world domination, which consisted of the 72 pillars of the underworld. Noble families of the upper-class devil, the extra fiends, and the countless armies of middle and lower-class devil soldiers beneath them. The total lifespan of a devil is approximately 10,000 years. The devils were originally led by the 4 great Satans. Most pure-blood devils look exactly like humans, though with at least a pair of black bat-shaped wings that can be hidden at will. The image changed, making an angel appear. Originating from heaven, angels are powerful beings who serve the biblical God and have the power to inflict pain on devils and, by extension, fallen angels, due to their light-based powers. Angels look similar to humans, except with white feathery wings and a halo positioned directly above the head. The image changed again, making a fallen angel appear. Fallen angels are angels who have fallen from the grace of God, due to having impure thoughts that lead them away from God's teachings in the Bible. They currently live in Grigori, their faction, led by Azazel. Fallen angels have an appearance similar to your angels with their wings, however, their wings are black in color as opposed to the white wings of the angels. Furthermore, because they were cast out of heaven by God, they also do not have halos above their heads. After explaining about the races, Gilgamesh turned his gaze to Arteria, who seemed to understand everything. Now I'm going to talk about what happened to these breeds. A long time ago there was a great war between these three factions. The devils were led by Lucifer, Beelzebub, Leviathan, and Asmodeus, the original great four Mu. The angels were led by God and the fallen angels by Azazel. It was a big bloody battle with several losses for all three sides. During the battle, two immensely powerful dragons, called Drake and Albion, also known as the two celestial dragons, who had the power to kill gods, appeared on the battlefield, causing even more chaos. The three factions teamed up temporarily to stop the two dragons, however they were very powerful, and in his final act the biblical god gave his life to kill and seal them both in two sacred gear called boosted gear, where Drake's soul and the divine dividing, where Albion's soul resided. After that the big four Mu were killed and the three factions retreated from their losses and are still in a cold war to this day. Gilgamesh finished his explanation and looked at Arteria that she was very surprised by all this. God is dead, asks Arteria perplexed. He may not be faithful to God, but even so it was surprising to imagine that God died. After all, she was not like other gods, like Zeus and Odin, but the god who created all humans. Gilgamesh nodded. What happened to the factions, asks Arteria curious. Well, after the death of the four great devil kings, a series of events took place in the underworld, and this resulted in new devils being chosen to take their place. They were Sertzk Scramari with the rank of Lucifer, Ajoka Astaroth with the rank of Beelzebub, Seraphal Citri with the rank of Leviathan, and Falbium Glaciolabalis with the rank of Asmodeus, and it remains so to this day. The angels, after the loss of God, had the archangel Michael taking control and becoming their leader, while the fallen angels continue with Azazel as their leader, and this continues today as a kind of cold war between them, says Gilgamesh to Arteria. What is this sacred gear, asks Arthur. Sacred gears, also known as God's artifacts, are items with powerful abilities granted to humans by God from the Bible. The original God of the Bible created the sacred gears as part of his system for performing miracles on earth. It has been stated that certain individuals with sacred gears grew up to be very powerful and influential, and that a large number of people who had their names recorded in history were likely possessors of sacred gear. There can be more than one sacred gear of the same type, such as blade blacksmith. Sacred gears can range from the common twice critical, to the rare sacred gear twilight healing, with the only exception being the Longinus, which are unique in their own way. If a sacred gear is removed from the owner, they will die. Arteria understood and thought it was like the noble phantasm. Can any being be born with them, questions the King of Knights. Only humans or human hybrids can be born with sacred gears. Angels and devils can get them by resurrecting a human or human hybrid as one of them. The fallen angels created a ceremony to extract and possess a sacred gear from the original wearer. The sacred gear also has a final activation state called balance breaker, which is the most powerful manifestation of the sacred gear. Once achieved, the balance breaker can be reinserted much more easily than the first time. An incomplete balance breaker can be achieved by self-sacrifice on the part of the user. However, this method of sacrifice does not count as a true balance breaker activation. Achieving balance breaker can be triggered by its owner's feelings. It is said that balance breaker was never intentional and that it was a flaw in the system created by God. Arteria nodded in understanding. What is this Longinus, asks Arthur. The Longinus are world-class sacred gears, each with multiple abilities compared to a normal sacred gear, which has only one, and has the power to kill gods. This class of sacred arts is also known as the god-destroying tools. There are 13 Longinus in total. Also, Longinus and balance breakers were never planned and are system failures. The Longinus class of sacred gears is named for the first sacred gear to reach this level of power. The true Longinus. Arteria was stunned to hear this. Weapons capable of killing gods? It's scary. Do you have one of those, asks Arteria. Gilgamesh smiles and summons Regulus axe, Drake's gauntlet, and a small tornado in his hand. I own 3 of them, said Gilgamesh to Arteria, who widened her eyes in bewilderment. Well, Valerie has one too, Gilgamesh says to Arteria, who stares at Valerie, who smiles. Now about the Holy Grail, says Gilgamesh to Arteria, who starts to pay more attention. He doesn't exist in this world, says Gilgamesh. Which, speaks Arteria, perplexed and frightened. As I said, they are different worlds, that's why in this world there is no Holy Grail. To invoke you I used another method. The closest thing you have to the Grail is Valerie's Longinus Seraphiat Grail, says Gilgamesh, making Valerie raise her hand and manifest a chalice. Arteria was perplexed. If the Holy Grail did not exist, there would be no way for her to fulfill her wish. But looking at Valerie's cup, an idea emerges. But you can use hers, says Arteria about the goblet in Valerie's hand. Gilgamesh shakes his head. Although powerful, Valerie's sacred gear does not allow the user to fulfill an omnipotent wish, only to connect to the principle of life, says Gilgamesh. Arteria was perplexed and scared. And I believe that even if you got the grail your wish could not come true, says Gilgamesh, making Arteria look at her with hatred, thinking that he despised her wish. After the Third Grail War, it was polluted by Ongram Manu and became an evil eddy power, a curse, the third element. Therefore, it is absolutely impossible to correct inconsistencies by precise calculations or interactions, and he will interpret any owner's wish as nothing but destruction and grant it. Furthermore, once opened, it will continue to flow endlessly and bring disaster, explains Gilgamesh. So, my wish, says Arteria, perplexed. Arteria couldn't believe it, her wish would be nothing but destruction. So, my people, says Arteria in a sad whisper. The grail may not exist here, Arteria, but we may one day find a way to fulfill your wish. So I want to give you a choice. I can't force you to stay here, so if you want to go back to the hero's throne and maybe be summoned again, I won't stop it, says Gilgamesh as he stands up. The biggest problem was not summoning Arteria but convincing her to stay. But there was another problem. Arteria became a heroic spirit to get the Holy Grail and save her people, but in this world the Holy Grail didn't exist. So what could make Arteria agree to stay here? This was something Gilgamesh did not know. Know that if you want to stay we will welcome you with open arms as part of our family. Maybe one day we can get the grail, but until then you can see it as a chance to start over, says Gilgamesh as he leaves with his group and leaves Arteria to her thoughts. In her mind, Arteria didn't know what to do. Should she stay or go? Some hours later. It was already past midnight and the whole house was quiet, representing that everyone was asleep. Arteria had been skeptical and uncomfortable with the situation she ended up getting herself into with Gilgamesh as her master, but she was already more at ease due to Asia and Valerie who had been close to her. Gilgamesh got up for a glass of water, something he does most of the time, and he felt a presence nearby. Following Gilgamesh's presence, he saw Arteria sitting on the porch floor while gazing at the stars. She was no longer wearing her armor but an outfit that Valerie had lent her. Gilgamesh had to admit, Arteria Pendragon was beautiful. She might not have as bulky a body as her Lancer version or the Devil's, but she had a pure, untouched beauty that reminded Gilgamesh of Asia and Gabriel. What was she doing there? That was what was going through Gilgamesh's mind, although he had an idea that had to do with it all. Still awake, hi, says Gilgamesh as he approaches Arteria and stands beside her. Arteria didn't even look at him and kept looking up at the stars. You too, Gilgamesh, said Arteria, and Gilgamesh could identify a twinge of anger in her tone when he mentioned her name. Her anger at the original Gilgamesh must be pretty great, Gilgamesh thinks. Thinking about your people, asks Gilgamesh as he too looks up at the stars. Arteria was silent for a moment while she thought. She never imagined that she was talking to someone like him, even though he was the descendant of the original. But something inside her told her that she could talk to Gilgamesh, that he would listen to her, that maybe he would understand her. And it scared her, being who he was, though he was different from the Gilgamesh she knew. The few hours she watched him suspiciously proved that. She couldn't imagine half the things he did the original doing, and she also had his conversation with Valerie. Arteria was in Valerie's room while the dumper was finding her a change of clothes for the King of Knights to wear. After a while in silence, Arteria spoke. How did you meet Gilgamesh? Asks Arteria, because she couldn't imagine Gilgamesh saving people without getting anything in return. After all, he saw everyone as filthy halves. Valerie looked at Arteria and spoke. Gil explained to you about the Longinus, so you might wonder how someone who possesses that power should be treated, says Valerie as she takes a seat next to Arteria. The King of Knights could feel the sadness in Valerie's words and figured it wasn't good. After all, when she removed Caliban from the stone, she was no longer recognized as a human. Imagine someone who has a weapon capable of killing a god. Arteria nodded. All vampires saw half-breeds as filthy, disgusting beings that were useless, so did I. But when I woke up my sacred gear, I thought my family would accept me, but they only saw me as a resource to be used whenever they wanted, an unworthy slave who wasn't even good for expressing their opinion, Valerie said slowly to Arteria. Arteria felt angry at how they treated Valerie, especially since she was a child at the time her sacred gear was awakened. But then Gilgamesh came and saved me. He didn't look at me as the wielder of the Seraphiate Grail but as a person who needed help, and he saved me by giving me the chance to one day be reunited with my brother, he said. Valerie with a smile. Arteria could see the glee she used when she spoke in the name of Gilgamesh. You had a difficult life, said Arteria sympathetically. We all did, even Asia, said Valerie. Arteria looked at her doubtfully. After all, she knew Asia, the little innocent girl who had talked to her, and Arteria had noticed the girl's innocence. Seeing her doubt, Valerie spoke. Asia was raised to be a nun and was even recognized as a holy maiden due to her sacred gear that could heal any being, but she was so innocent that one day she ended up curing a devil, said Valerie, making Arteria widen her eyes before Valerie continue. So she was kicked out of the church and tricked by some fallen angels who wanted to steal her sacred gear, but Gil saved her, and even saved her when the devil came after her. He's willing to fight a war against anyone if it means we're safe, Valerie said with a smile on her face. Arteria listened intently as Valerie explained, and this Gilgamesh was very different from what she knew. He is willing to do anything to save and keep the people close to him protected, just like she wants to save her kingdom. We all have our own history, but even so Gil took care of us all and gave us a purpose. I'm sure Gilgamesh will find a way to get the grail, or even you can get another purpose, said Valerie as she stood up. Arteria spent the time reflecting on what Domper said. Arteria remembered the conversation she had had with the Domper, and also the conversation she had had with Mordred. Arteria was now facing one of the people responsible for her kingdom. Ahead of Arteria was Mordred, who had stopped her as she walked through the house. "Can I talk to you for a bit, Dad?" asks Mordred to the surprise of Arteria, who nods her head. Both had left the house and were now in a place where no one could bother them. "Why don't you choose me as king?" Mordred asks. "You didn't have what it took to be a king," said Arteria simply. Mordred squeezed her hand tightly until she took a deep breath and spoke again. "I get it. This time here with Gilgamesh made me understand. I really wasn't someone you needed as a king. And I didn't even understand my own will," Mordred tells Arteria. The King of Knights is quite surprised that Mordred has changed so much, and the reason for his change is Gilgamesh. That was surprising to say the least. Mordred turned to Arteria and looked at her while manifesting Clarent in her hand. Arteria showed no sign of reaction as she felt no malice in Mordred's intentions. "I hope one day I can fight with you again, father," said Mordred as he placed his sword on the ground. "If we continue with the same master, this will happen," said Arteria. Mordred sighed before turning and saying one last thing to Arteria. "Give Gilgamesh a chance, he's a good person and a good teacher," Mordred said before leaving. Arteria was left with her thoughts again. After leaving her memories, Arteria gave her answer to Gilgamesh. "Yes. You must think my desire is stupid, just like your ancestor did," said Arteria as she looked up at the sky, but Gilgamesh could recognize anger in her voice. "Perhaps the original thought so, perhaps from a king's point of view it did," said Gilgamesh as he looked up at the sky, "but personally I don't." Arthur turned to him in surprise. "Which?" questions Arteria without understanding. "If I lost them all I would do anything to have them by my side again, even if there was something extreme," Gilgamesh said, referring to Sabas, Inkiju, Valerie, Mordred, and Asia. He really couldn't imagine his life without them, and would be willing to do anything for them, even if it meant their destruction. "I understand. But I have nothing left, neither my people nor my wish that can be fulfilled. I have lost my purpose," said Arteria sadly. Looking at her, Gilgamesh said, "I've heard that we are all born with a purpose. That every living thing, no matter how small or big, has a reason to exist, that we all come to have a greater purpose. That all our lives have meaning from the beginning." Gilgamesh closed his eyes for a moment, letting the words sink in, before shaking his hand. "But this is wrong." Bright crimson eyes turned to the sky. "This is dead wrong. Life is meaningless, none of us are born with a meaning. We are just born, and that's it. Life has no higher purpose than life, no matter how much poets and philosophers like to tell us otherwise. The truth is that there is no reason for us to exist." A small smile, nothing but a small twist of her lips. "But that's okay. Just because we were born meaningless doesn't mean we can't find one." Gilgamesh leaned against the wall and looked up at the sky. "In this world, we are all born without purpose, but surely, if you search throughout your life, one day you will surely find something of value. A treasure for those who are their own, and when you find the most precious treasure, when you hold it in your own hands, you will surely realize, ah, so this is why I was born. This is my life's purpose." Gilgamesh looked at Arteria. "In this world I found mine, whether wanting to protect people close to me, or a desire. Just because you've lost your purpose doesn't mean you can't find another one," said Gilgamesh. Arteria turned her gaze to him. "Maybe one day you can make your dream come true, I'm willing to help you if you want, but until then nothing stops you from finding a new reason to continue," said Gilgamesh while looking directly into Arteria's eyes. She looked at the sky before letting out a weak little laugh. "I never thought I'd hear that from you," she said to Gilgamesh, who laughed. "Yes, I never imagined myself saying that to King Arthur either," said Gilgamesh with a laugh. "You shouldn't trust me, but here is proof of good faith," said Gilgamesh, drawing Arteria's attention. The King of Heroes snapped his fingers as a golden ripple appeared in front of Arteria before an item came out. It is a luxurious piece of equipment made of gold and decorated with blue enamel that looks more like a treasure to show dignity and nobility, like a crown or staff, than a weapon, an inscription written in fairy letters engraved in its center to show that it is not man's work. This wasn't just any item, it was Avalon. Avalon, the eternal utopia, the sacred and crowned scabbard of King Arthur's sword, Excalibur. The moment Arteria's eyes settled on her, she couldn't believe her sword scabbard was there. "Like?" asks Arteria as she takes Avalon in her hands. "The Gate of Babylon has all the treasures in the world," said Gilgamesh as he looked at Arteria. He actually already intended to give it to Arteria Avalon, so he had two in his treasury, so he would always be complete. The moment Arteria put her hands on Avalon, her sword Excalibur manifested and entered its original scabbard, and Arteria could feel the connection between them and them gaining the healing abilities of the eternal utopia. Excalibur's sheath, Avalon, grants its wearers limited immortality through constant regeneration, in addition to preventing physical deterioration caused by aging. The Avalon Utopia was thought to be derived from the island that produced the Apple of Immortality in Greek mythology. The wearer of the sheath receives a potent healing, allowing critical and fatal wounds to be quickly repaired to restore the wearer's health. Minor injuries are easily restored, and even large missing parts of the body and destroyed vital organs, such as the heart, can be quickly restored at the critical moment before death. Targeting anything other than the wielder's head in order to destroy their brain is futile, requiring a decisive attack to be made in order to do some real damage. His role as a noble ghost is an absolute defense that completely protects its wearer in the fairy realm, Avalon, the unapproachable utopia King Arthur dreamed of and said to have gone after his death. It is the greatest protection in the world that goes beyond defense or reflection, completely isolating its user in a world completely separate from the ordinary world. The sheath dissipates into countless tiny particles in the air and engulfs the wearer to become a portable fortress that eliminates all interference. It is the limited field of the fairy's tranquil domain that keeps all the filth of the outside world and allows nothing to harm the tranquil king who stays in the land of Avalon. The individual is protected from all destructive interference in the physical realm, translinear from parallel worlds and multidimensional communication up to the sixth dimension. It is on the level of true magic in itself, which transcends all magic, and not even the 5 spells can overcome the barrier. Something as valuable, if not more, as the sword of promised victory itself. Running a hand over the scabbard of her sword, Arteria sighed and made her decision. She stood up and looked directly into the crimson eyes of Gilgamesh, who was looking at her in doubt. In a swift movement she pulled Excalibur from its scabbard and pointed at Gilgamesh, who did not flinch, the simple reason why he felt no ill intent from Arteria. In a quick move she placed her sword on the ground before speaking. I accept you as my master. From now on my sword is your sword and your destiny will be my destiny, said Arteria with an honor that can only be said for possessing the King of Knights. Gilgamesh gave a big smile to Arteria that had her cheeks tinged with pink. Mainly because of Gilgamesh's charm that she is able to make even a goddess of beauty blush. Then Gilgamesh said something that took the servant by surprise. I swear here to Saber, or rather Arteria Pendragon, I swear on my pride of the King of Heroes and on all my friends that I will never disrespect your will and your honor, and if I did it you can kill me, said Gilgamesh with a serious face, taking Arteria completely by surprise. The King of Knights smiles. Very well, I accept your oath, said Arteria respectfully. Gilgamesh laughs before catching Arteria in a hug, making the woman blush before trying to get free using Excalibur, only to have Gil dodge and start laughing. They spent some more time talking before each went to their room. Arteria slept with a thought. Perhaps he is not such a bad master, thought the King of Knights before going to his sleep. A few days later. It had been a few days since Arteria was summoned by Gilgamesh, and although she was a bit skeptical and closed off at first, she let go. The King of Knights had achieved a good relationship with everyone. She had become good friends with Asia and Valerie and always talked to them, and they had a good relationship with Inkiju and Sabas as well, and surprisingly with Mordred too, although their relationship was neutral, and with Gilgamesh also, where the two had a good relationship, and Arteria came to see him as a different person from his ancestor. Arteria had also learned more of the supernatural world through Gilgamesh, who taught her everything in detail, from the evil pieces and the abilities of supernatural beings to the sacred gear and its abilities with the Longinus. Now she was quite at ease with everyone, especially with Gilgamesh. Speaking of the King of Heroes, it was possible to see him walking the streets currently alone. The sky was dark, showing that night had already fallen with the stars shining in the sky. It was around 8 o'clock at night and there were few people in the streets. Gilgamesh walked alone until he stopped and looked down. Currently he was on a bridge and below him was a river that ran as far as the eye could see, and below the bridge a man was sitting with 2 fishing poles while looking at the river. Anyone would think he was a normal person, but Gilgamesh knew better. The magical aura that the man was purposely radiating to attract him, or rather call him. With a leap he jumped on the bridge, not caring if anyone was watching, after all there was no one around, and landed beside the man and sat down with him. Now you found me," said the man in a joking tone as he offered a fishing rod to Gilgamesh, who took it and began fishing with the man. "I think you were inviting me, after all your magical signature was well exposed," said Gilgamesh in a joking tone. The man just laughed before answering. "Well, that might be true," the man said with a laugh. Gilgamesh then looked at him directly. His appearance is the most human that Gilgamesh has ever seen, a supernatural being. Night black hair that mingled with blonde in part of his bangs that covered his forehead, violet eyes darker than Sana's, with the face of a mid-20s and a black cape. Dressed in a red-brown turtleneck long-sleeved coat where the zipper opened slightly to reveal his chest, wearing long grey jeans and black shoes. "So what do you want from me, Azazel?" said Gilgamesh as he revealed the real name of the man beside him, who smiled. He was Azazel, the leader of the fallen angels faction, ruler of the Grigori, the man who was turned into a scapegoat by his own father, and who was once called the archangel of doom. All supernatural beings, they all really have a special characteristic, no matter how they like it, but everyone. They must be prettier or prettier than usual, none of them really ugly, they all have specialties that make them attractive. But Azazel doesn't. He looks exactly like normal people, his face can't be called handsome or ugly. He exactly looks like the human aspect. And that was irritating Gilgamesh. For Gilgamesh the man in front of him was dangerous. Azazel was perhaps not the strongest or one of those among the supernatural world, after all his power was Satan level, something big, but if you compare to Xerxes and others it wasn't much. What really made him dangerous was his mind, a genius who was able to recreate even a sacred gear. Azazel was the fallen angel who taught humanity about war, taught them to make shields, create swords, forge armor and knives. He is the one who gives them weapons and even spread rumors to teach them witchcraft. For some to be like that, creating things like that shouldn't be difficult, he was after all the one who taught humanity about them. He was a genius monster wearing a human body, a genius that could only be compared and surpassed by Ajoka Beelzebub, someone so evil and cruel that he was recognized as the most cruel and vile of the fallen angels. And that's true, his cruelty was such that even Shiva confirmed it, there's a reason even centuries passed and Azazel continued to lead the fallen angels, his cruelty was such that Cockabile was nothing but an innocent cub next to him. While God was waging war with Lucifer, Azazel created an organization and convinced thousands of fallen angels to join his side, making a force capable of fighting God and Lucifer. Even before monsters like Xerxes and Ajoka were alive, Azazel already ruled his own faction and performed acts that would make even the cruelest of devils cringe in fear. There was a reason why even Grigori had the smallest population among the three factions, they were still so feared. And this man was one of them. He was the Archangel of Doom and the man who taught humans the art of war. Hehe, I think I should also be honored to be in your presence, King of Heroes Gilgamesh, or maybe you prefer otherwise, Sekur or even be called Stronger Exorcist, Paladin, said Azazel with a big smile. He knows. That's what went through Gilgamesh's mind. Azazel knew about his true identity. Even when he became the strongest exorcist with the title of Paladin, or Holy Knight, Gilgamesh never announced himself to the world for a few reasons. The first was that he didn't want to draw attention, after all if he announced himself everyone would see him as an ally of the church and he would have many restrictions on his actions, and this hinders his plans. Imagine what Xerxes would think if he found out that the strongest exorcist was in the town where his sister lived and even threatened her. This would only result in a war, or at the very least a battle against Xerxes and the devil faction. That's why Gilgamesh kept his titles hidden so no one would know. But it looks like he couldn't escape them all. I'm surprised to find that out, although considering who you are that explains it, says Gilgamesh as he turns his attention to the river. Yes, imagine my surprise to find that the strongest exorcist is the descendant of the King of Heroes and possessed Longinus' Zenith Tempest and was also the man who defeated and tamed Longinus Regulus Nemia and then appears in Devil Territory, another descendant of Gilgamesh who owns the boosted gear. Very suspicious, don't you think, speaks Azazel with a cynical tone in his voice, but he was also wary. Azazel had his guard up, as the man in front of him is certainly very dangerous. The strongest exorcist was the young man who defeated Vasco Strata, the man who was considered the summit of humanity. And so if you count this with your 3 Longinus you can imagine the danger that Gilgamesh was. And the moment Azazel saw Gilgamesh he knew the boy was a monster. Her power might be contained but Azazel felt like he was in the presence of Xerxes and Ajoka, but what scared the most was his own aura. It wasn't about power, it was the very natural aura that emanated from him, the majesty that emanated from him made Azazel feel small, like an insect. You're not human, you're a demigod and you still have the sacred gear of the Longinus class and that already puts you in a scary class, said Azazel as he looked at the river. Gilgamesh knew what Azazel was trying to say. It was the fact that he was a demigod. After a while in this world Gilgamesh had thought, where are the demigods? They had never been shown in the canon, the closest they had were the Valkyries, who serve the Norse gods and the Reapers who serve Hades the Greek god of the dead. They had divine blood, but they were not demigods. It was then that Gilgamesh discovered the reason. The demigods were forbidden to exist, due to a pact between the gods. The power that the demigods possessed was gigantic, even the weakest already possessed great power because they were children of the gods. They were able to draw on a portion of their father's divine power and this allowed them great feats. Just look at the mythology where most of the great heroes were demigods. Hercules, son of the king of the Greek gods, Zeus, the man who was recognized as the greatest hero of Greece and even gained a rank among the gods. Achilles, son of a Greek sea nymph Thetis, and descended from a primitive sea god Nereus, the hero of the Trojan War and one who gained invulnerability by being bathed in divine flames and trained by Chiron the trainer of heroes. Karna, son of the Hindu sun god Surya, the invulnerable hero who wielded the spear Vasaka Shakti, the hero who earned the respect even of the god Indra. Among many others, all were great heroes, children of gods. The power of the demigods was great enough to destabilize the balance of the world, along with the fact that the gods always had several demigods, this only increased. So the gods had made a non-verbal agreement to stop having children with mortals, or at least decrease it, thus keeping the balance of the world. So here was Gilgamesh, a two-thirds divine demigod who possesses sacred gear of the Longinus class, though his deity is inherited from the original Gilgamesh, as his parents are human. This already made its very existence capable of destroying the balance of the world. Although I am very surprised that you have 3 Longinus, considering I don't believe you were born with them all, and also the fact that your body can withstand the pressure exerted by them, so how do you have them? Asked Azazel as he looked at Gilgamesh out of the corner of his eye. Gilgamesh laughed before answering. I don't mind saying. I was truly born with Zenith Tempest 2 years ago and fought and tamed Regulus Nemia, said Gilgamesh. But doesn't that explain boosted gear? Asks Azazel curiously. Some time ago I found some of his fallen angels killing a boy to extract his sacred gear, so I killed them and used my power to extract the boy's sacred gear for me, but keeping him alive so he could go on living. Gilgamesh while looking at the river. Azazel's eyes widened slightly at that. His fallen angels weren't the most loyal, as they always did things behind his back, so it's no surprise they tried to kill someone with power. Though it made him sad. But what surprised him most was what he said. To be able to extract the sacred gear from someone and leave those people still living? This was something that no one could do as the sacred gear was directly linked to the user's soul, taking it out would be the same as taking his soul. Was this boy that strong? To be able to break the dimension of a sacred gear and extract it from its owner and leave it alive? This was indeed scary, but interesting. How many secrets was this boy still hiding? Though he was curious to know the power of a Longinus in possession of a demigod. To be able to extract the sacred gear from someone and leave them alive? That's pretty scary, said Azazel with a laugh, to which Gilgamesh responded. Spending time with the angels teaches you a few things, Gilgamesh told Azazel. So how's Hakuryuakao doing? Gilgamesh asked Azazel. The same showed no surprise that Gilgamesh knew about this, after all it was not a secret. Okay, he's the strongest Hakuryuakao past, present and future, said Azazel proudly of his adopted son. I see, good, so he can give me a good battle. Although it's strange, don't you think, the Hakuryuakao is half demon and half human while the Sekuryuati is half god and half human, said Gilgamesh with a smile. Azazel laughed at that. Ha ha ha, it's true, so how far have you mastered boosted gear? Asked Azazel curiously. And before Gilgamesh could respond, Drake defeated him. Good Governor General of the Fallen Angels, my current partner is arguably the most powerful host I've ever owned, far surpassing the past, present, and future of any of mine or Albion's hosts. And he's the only host I've ever had who didn't need to train to get access to my balance breaker or juggernaut drive. And he's already dealt with previous boosted gear users, which means he has nothing to worry about when using juggernaut drive. Drake spoke with pure pride and arrogance in his words. Azazel was speechless, he just couldn't understand what Drake had just told him. How is something like this possible? Azazel almost screamed in a mixture of shock and concern. Because if what Drake just told him was true, Vala would probably be in trouble. You know what, you can tell me later that I need a drink. Azazel moaned as he rubbed his forehead. Why did you tell him, Drake? Gilgamesh questioned his dragon through their bond, which simply snorted in response. Which? I'm proud to call you my partner, you're my most powerful host, but I can't help but brag. Drake answered before he was quiet. Gilgamesh shook his head. Sighing, Gilgamesh stood up, making Azazel look surprised. I think I should go, said Gilgamesh before turning to leave. Have a good night, said Azazel before getting up and saying one more thing, before you go I want you to answer me, whose side are you on? Azazel asked this question as he had realized that Gilgamesh had no love and loyalty for the church. Gilgamesh stopped with his back to Azazel and replied, I'm on the human side, said Gilgamesh, making Azazel doubt, I don't care what you and the fiends do, as long as you don't take advantage of innocent humans and I won't do anything. I do not mind, Azazel then laughed and replied. That would be impossible, as long as the supernatural exists they have always taken advantage of humans, said Azazel in an empty voice. It is true. Wanting that to change would be like wanting a lion to stop eating meat. And that's why as long as I live I won't let you harm humans, said Gilgamesh in a serious voice. Is this a threat, King of Heroes? Questions Azazel with a dangerous tone. That is a promise, Archangel of Doom, said Gilgamesh seriously as the leader of the fallen angels frowned at the mention of his title he held when he had his white wings. Azazel let out a cynical laugh. And then it happened. In less than a second Azazel created a spear of light in his hand and held it. This spear had been embedded with enough power to vaporize ultimate class beings, Burning steels could even kill a being of Satan class, and in that same second he turned and swung his spear at Gilgamesh. The intention was not to kill Gilgamesh, the intention of Azazel was to see how far the King of Heroes was willing to go, what he would be willing to do. So blood goes everywhere. So Azazel then looked at his hand, or rather the lack of it. The dismembered right hand fell to the ground with a splash a few meters away. Azazel looked at his severed hand, confused, before comprehension began to dawn. In a single instant he leapt away from Gilgamesh and created a magic circle on his torn arm to stop the bleeding. This was because his instincts had told him, or rather had screamed in terror when he realized something. If he had taken another second he would be dead by now. Two of his eyes looked up and met a pair of crimson eyes, no longer hidden behind lidded slits, staring at him with utter boredom. His lips, no longer adorned with a smile, were in a grim line as he watched them over his shoulder. The bare blade reflected the moonlight from the edge, now being held in his left hand, gleaming like a splinter in the night's darkness. The fallen angel went still as he felt his eyes on them, petrified with terror, no longer wanting his attention now that they finally got it. Nothing moved as the fallen angels felt his life hanging by a thread as the King of Heroes watched him, the bloodlust filling the air contrasting with the disinterest in his eyes. Azazel did not expect this. He wanted to test, though it was too risky, as far as Gilgamesh was willing to go. But it looks like he's bitten off more than he could chew. At that moment Azazel was afraid for one reason only. In that instant Gilgamesh had surpassed him, surpassed the power and training he had had for centuries and ripped his arm off. If not for his instincts trained and tempered through centuries of battle and warfare, Azazel knew he would have been killed. And he wasn't prepared for what was coming next either. In a single instant Gilgamesh appeared in front of him, scattering his sword, and then punched Azazel in the belly making him bend over, before his right hand caught the fallen's neck and lifted him, causing Azazel to hang suspended. A single look from Azazel into Gilgamesh's crimson eyes made him filled with fear and lost his will to fight. His very presence screamed danger. Like a sleeping dragon, just waiting to release its strength. At the Azazel moment, we can laugh together, play together, insult each other like we were best friends, but at the same time, if you do something against humans I'll call all my treasures and release them all here and at Grigori to kill him. And trust me, even though we're joking and laughing together, if I kill you now I'll still smile when I see your mutilated corpse under my feet. Gilgamesh swung his hand and threw Azazel to the ground which landed perfectly. He only looked at his arm for a moment before looking at Gilgamesh and laughing. Really, such love for humans, are you sure it's not a lost child of his? Asks Azazel with a different tone as if he hadn't escaped death a few moments ago. Gilgamesh glared at him before turning his back and walking away while Azazel watched him. He just looked at his severed arm on the ground and laughed. Really, humans are scary, Azazel said to himself, for in that moment he had felt a feeling he had never felt before. Fear. The sheer terror that just seeing someone's existence would make you despair. The feeling was not unknown to Azazel. He fought and saw things that would make even the greatest warriors weep in fear. Even before beings like Xerxes and Ajuka and other monsters were born he was already doing scary things, although he regretted it. He fought against God himself and Lucifer and came out alive. He fought in the Great War of the Three Factions and saw the terror that the two heavenly dragons caused. He saw entire nations and civilizations rise and fall. But at that moment it was the first time he felt that kind of fear. The fear of knowing that there is a monster near you that can kill you anytime it wants to and just doesn't kill you because you are not worth the effort. Looking at his arm, Azazel realized he would have that memory forever. Although he could and would recreate his arm through his research with sacred gear. He never blames Gilgamesh for ripping off his arm, after all he was the one who attacked. And to think that a person like that would have so much love for humans. I bet you'd like to meet him, Dad, Azazel says to himself as he leaves to head back to Grigori. Even he remembers that he had left a lot of papers unfinished. It will be a headache. The only thing Azazel didn't notice was that during a small exchange of glances between him and Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh's eyes had taken on a new shape. With Gilgamesh after his encounter with Azazel had gone straight to his house. He really didn't expect to have an encounter with the leader of the fallen angels, let alone that he would know his identity. He really isn't someone to be underestimated. He also thought it was very silly for Azazel to want to test him. Gilgamesh knew that the leader of the fallen angels had not gone with the intention of killing, but Gilgamesh still cut one of his arms. After all he is not someone who would accept such a thing, and his point had also already been proven to the leader of the fallen angels. And Gilgamesh also knew that Azazel could easily replace his arm from his research on sacred gear. When Gilgamesh got home he saw everyone happy and getting along. Arturia had become very good friends with Valerie and Asia. Mainly because Asia likes the legend of King Arthur and that's why Arturia tells her stories. Everyone had gone to dinner afterwards since Arturia and Mordred were giving him a headache. The two alone ate more food than everyone else together, they were really bottomless pits, if anyone saw them they would think they are sisters. And it seemed Mordred wanted to be superior to Arturia in everything, so she kept inventing competitions, like who eats the most, and Arturia's pride wouldn't let her lose to Mordred. Currently everyone was sitting in the room watching. Arturia and Mordred were ironically still eating. It seemed they had both loved Saba's and Gil's cooking. Asia was sitting next to Valerie as they watched the animated film, and she from time to time asks Arturia something. Sabas was sitting reading a book, which the butler always did when he wasn't working. And Inkiju was reading a book about short stories that he had found. Gilgamesh sighed and couldn't help feeling that everything was very calm, without action. Although he liked to go smoothly, it was tedious. But it was better than getting into conflict all the time. Gilgamesh stopped, along with everyone, when they noticed that someone was trying to teleport into the house, which was difficult due to Saba's barrier. Sabas had made a very powerful barrier to protect the house from invaders. It was as powerful as the barriers that protected the Norse and Shinto factions that were known for their very powerful barrier magic. Gilgamesh cursed his tongue, that he just said he was calm and that happened. It looked like karma was against him. An ability to control karma would be interesting. Gilgamesh left that thought for later. Everyone became alert when a magic circle took shape behind them. Gilgamesh noticed that the magic circle was from the Gremory clan, but the energy coming out was greater than Rias's, so he already guessed who it was. When the light disappeared, it was possible to see two people, more specifically a man and a woman who emanated a demonic aura. Two devils. The male devil is a handsome male who appears to be in his early 20s. He has shoulder-length red auburn hair and blue-green eyes. He wore noble clothes and looked like a male version of Rias. What attracted the most attention was the immense power he emanated. The woman is a beautiful young woman in her early 20s with silver hair in her back, which features a long braid on each side with small blue bows at the ends, while the rest is loose, ending in twin braids and red eyes. She is seen wearing a blue and white French-made outfit with long sleeves and a white-made sash over her head with red lipstick as a cosmetic accessory. They are Xerxes Lucifer, the strongest of the 4 great devil kings, and the top 10 ragged devil, and his wife the silver-haired annihilation queen and the strongest queen of the underworld Graphia Lucifuge. The moment Xerxes Lucifer and his wife opened their eyes to greet Gilgamesh and his group, they stopped. For at that moment Arturia was with Excalibur, protected with invisible air, close to Lucifer's throat. Which? Xerxes questions when he felt the sword inches from his throat. Xerxes Graphia yelled as she tried to go help her husband, only to be stopped when Clarent was pressed to her throat. "Hold it there, bitch," said Mordred, her eyes narrowed. Graphia froze when she felt the sword pressed to her neck. Xerxes was about to get ready to free himself but stopped when he felt a burning in his throat at the spot next to where Arturia's sword was, so he noticed. "This is a holy sword," thought Xerxes with a note of fear in his voice. It was certainly a holy sword, but Xerxes couldn't identify which one it was because it was covered in air. And that was dangerous. Holy sword was one of the devil's worst enemies due to their property of killing dark beings. No matter how strong the devil was, he wouldn't be unharmed from taking a blow from a holy sword. A single wrong move and Xerxes could end up pretty bad. "Stop," said Gilgamesh in a voice that emanated power, making even Xerxes and Graphia momentarily freeze. "But master, they can be threats. They must be eliminated," Mordred said as he pressed a little more Clarent to Graphia's throat. Arturia nods. "I will not speak again." "Stop," said Gilgamesh once more and looked at the two, who froze when they saw his crimson eyes. The two reluctantly put away their weapons and returned to Gilgamesh's side, leaving Xerxes and Graphia in awe. He had controlled two people so powerful just by talking. How powerful was he then? "To what do I owe the honor of your visit, Xerxes Lucifer?" Gilgamesh asked with amusement in his voice. Xerxes did not flinch despite the power he felt emanating from Gilgamesh. "Sorry for arriving like this, King of Heroes Gilgamesh, or perhaps you prefer Sekiruti?" asked Xerxes with an amused tone. Gilgamesh smiled. "I honestly don't care what you call me." "So what do I owe the invasion of my house to?" asks Gilgamesh. Xerxes made a slightly apologetic expression. "Sorry for breaking in," says Xerxes with an apologetic tone. "No problem, although I'm surprised you managed to break through the barrier around the house," said Gilgamesh before turning his gaze to Sabas. "I admit that I haven't put my strongest barriers in, I'll reinforce them later," Sabas said with a nod from Gilgamesh. Xerxes can't help but be surprised by this. The plan was that they came here 2 days ago, but the barriers were so strong that they couldn't make it, and Xerxes ended up asking Ajoka to decode them. Even the underworld genius took 2 days and 2 nights to figure out how to get around the barriers. Xerxes even said he would go the normal way, but Ajoka stopped him, saying these barrier formulas were so amazing that it was the coolest job he's ever had in the decades, and I would like to know who did. Xerxes could not imagine what the capacity of the strongest barrier would be. "Please have a seat," said Gilgamesh to the two who sat on the nearest sofas. "Thank you very much. By the way, as you already know, my name is Xerxes and this is my wife Graphia," said Xerxes, introducing himself to his wife as well. Gilgamesh smiled. "Well, you may already know, my name is Gilgamesh, these are Arturia, Mordred, Inkiju, Sabas, Asia and Valerie, said Gilgamesh, pointing to each one of them. Xerxes and Graphia nodded in agreement on the presentation. Well, even though you broke into my house, that doesn't mean I have to be a bad host. So would you like a drink? A wine maybe, asks Gilgamesh as he rests his head in his hand. Xerxes smiled at that. That would be appreciated, Xerxes said with a smile. Gilgamesh waved his hand and just like that a golden ripple appeared beside him and out of it came a pitcher of wine made entirely of gold and some glasses along with it. Gilgamesh took the jar and filled each of the bodies floating towards everyone in the room including Gilgamesh's friends. Xerxes and his wife, Graphia, took the glasses before drinking some and looking dazed. Even Graphia's stoic expression was gone, replaced by one with a look of surprise. That was the best wine they ever drank. This was the best wine I've ever had, Xerxes said before taking another sip with his wife nodding in affirmation. Obviously, only the best is part of my treasure after all, said Gilgamesh with a smile as he sipped his wine. So what brings you here, Xerxes? Asks Gilgamesh curiously. Xerxes coughed into his hand before speaking. I would like to invite you to join our faction, said Xerxes with a smile. For Devil faction it would be an incredible power-up if Gilgamesh the current Securuti would join them. And if it had the people who were with Gilgamesh, it would be even better. Xerxes could feel the power emanating from them, and they all had power in the ultimate class, except the girl Asia. And Gilgamesh, Sabas, and Inkiju had even greater power. If Xerxes fought Gilgamesh he didn't know if he could win. And he could also help his sister's problem. I refuse, Gilgamesh said to Xerxes instantly. The same with Graphia were taken by surprise by the speed of his response. Can you tell me why? We could offer you what you wanted, they could give you wealth, status, power, women, and even immortality, said Xerxes trying to convince him. Gilgamesh laughed. I just don't like the fiends, even more after what your sister did to me, said Gilgamesh. Xerxes frowned at that. He knew the idiocy his sister had done in trying to manipulate him, and Xerxes sure as hell didn't want him as an enemy. They might have gained a great ally if not for her. And the many ways to get all that you offered me, said Gilgamesh, smiling. After all it was true. And he has sufficient wealth in the gate of Babylon as well as other means of obtaining immortality. As for women, he was happy with Valerie. Xerxes sighed in defeat as Graphia had a frown on her face. He was only a human so he should be more than grateful that her husband made this proposal in person. It should be pretty simple to convince him. I'm sorry for the intrusion, but I think you understand our meaning as a devil, right? Graphia asks looking at him and Xerxes incarnates her with curiosity. Yes, replied Gilgamesh, smiling. And why aren't you afraid? Graphia asked calmly, we are beings who can hurt you on a whim. As if she were testing him, Graphia unleashed some of her demonic energy, creating a shock wave that shattered the glass in the windows and overhead lights. A visible, black and red aura formed around her body as she spread her wings, gathering spheres of demonic energy in her hands. Xerxes stared at his wife with a face that could be described as, what are you trying to do? The entire group of Gilgamesh became serious and increased their power prepared for anything Graphia sent. Gilgamesh just found it amusing. Well, Gilgamesh guessed that Graphia was hiding a great deal of power from her. After all she had power comparable to a Satan, said to have power compared to Seraphal Leviathan, and there was also a reason she was the strongest queen in the underworld. Gilgamesh had to give it to Graphia. She was strong and in control. But if a mere devil could make him cringe, what kind of king of heroes would Gilgamesh be? The source of Graphia's display of power was the demonic energy within her. It was like a waterfall that originated from a stream. Cut the stream and the waterfall disappears. All Gilgamesh had to do was carefully extract some strength from him and snap his fingers. The relentless aura instantly vaporized into the air. Any demonic energy Graphia was mustering disappeared along with her. The queen's eyes widened, and the color in her cheeks faded as she stumbled back before Gilgamesh snapped his fingers again and the wave of demonic energy flowed back into her body. What just happened? Xerxes asked, eyeing Gilgamesh warily, for not even he understood. Graphia's hand firmly gripped the side of the sofa as if helping her balance. Her breathing was a little harder and deeper than moments before, but other than that, her face didn't catch any other outward emotion. It reminded him a lot of Konako, actually. Gilgamesh smiled. He simply stated, I'm not afraid, because there's nothing to fear. The queen's gaze was wary for good reason. For the first time in probably a long time, she was completely outdone by an opponent. Gilgamesh could barely imagine the panic going through her mind as he effectively switched off the demonic energy in her, downgrading her from a devil to the level of a mere human. Xerxes, seeing his wife's face, quickly rose and stepped in front of her. While he was wary of the fact that his wife had been almost turned off with a single snap of Gilgamesh's fingers, he was also very curious to know how far this power would go. If Xerxes knew how much he would regret it. I'm sorry about my wife, she's mad about what you did to my sister. We're on our way out, said Xerxes, closing his eyes. But before that I would like to give you a warning, said Xerxes, opening his eyes and releasing his power, making the whole house shake. It felt like the world itself was vibrating as Xerxes' demonic aura sprang to life, causing an aura of destruction power to surge around him. Even Gilgamesh's servants and group were surprised by the power of the Crimson Mu, especially Asia and Valerie, who were feeling suffocated until Inkija protected them. That was the power of the irregular devil, the power of a super devil. A devil capable of rivaling gods. If you become a threat to my faction or my sister or my wife, I will destroy you, Xerxes said with great power and seriousness in his voice to get the message across. Everything was silent for a moment. So something cut this silence. It was laughter. Gilgamesh was laughing as if he had just seen the funniest thing in the world. Everyone was perplexed by this reaction, including Xerxes, who never imagined anyone would laugh if he could. Ha 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 ha, that was very good, Xerxes. It's been a long time since I had so much laughter, said Gilgamesh as he calmed down from the burst of laughter. Then the King of Heroes got up and walked to stand beside Xerxes. Then Gilgamesh placed his hand on the Devil King's shoulder, and all of Xerxes' aura vanished to his own shock. After all, if we are going to discuss something, said Gilgamesh as he looked Xerxes straight in the eye. The same looked into Gilgamesh's eyes and all was silent. Then the sound of falling took everyone's attention. Everyone was perplexed by what they saw. Xerxes, Lucifer, the strongest devil in the underworld, the ragged devil who reached the top 10 and who in his true form is considered a monster, was kneeling with an expression of terror at the feet of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh looked at him wearily. That's better. If we are going to discuss something, you must understand who exactly is above whom, said Gilgamesh, looking at Xerxes with boredom. Know your place, mongrel, said Gilgamesh with disgust in his eyes. For he is the King of Heroes and would not accept anyone, in heaven or on earth, who stares at him from above. Not even the strongest devil was worthy to look into his eyes. Fear. Fear is a primordial feeling, something that has been inside of us from the beginning. All beings have fear, from men to animals, because no one can live without it, something that is within us like love and hate. Fear is a survival instinct that helps us to evolve in each moment. It is an instinct that awakens when we have only one thought. Fight or run. Animals see fear as an ally as it helps them survive and thrive, attachments that help them live under the dangers of the world. Humans saw fear as weakness and tried to get rid of it, but this is impossible because fear is in everyone. It's something that moves humanity, although they try to ignore it. Humans bypass fear. They think they don't need it. Many argue otherwise, that fear is a survival skill. But if that were the case, why is it still necessary when humanity is the dominant predator? Why does the top of the food chain need survival skills? Because humanity knows, deep down, that there is something to be afraid of. Fear is an overwhelming feeling that we could never help being without it. But there are also many kinds of fear, that of a warrior dying in battle or of a child because of the father's anger. But there is something even more frightening, when you are faced with an unbelievable being, someone so overwhelming that his very existence is meaningless, a being that could kill you whenever he wanted and that would bring fear into even the hearts of the most powerful warriors. For many this would be a devil, a cruel and unscrupulous being who would kill, destroy and steal anything he wanted just because he could. But for the strongest devil in the underworld, Xerxes, Lucifer, he knew that this was not a devil. For when he felt this power and presence for the first time, he was not in front of a devil, not even a god. He was in the presence of a human. In the presence of the King of Heroes. In the presence of Gilgamesh. When Xerxes had discovered that he had a descendant of the King of Heroes in his territory, he had been overjoyed that they could put a powerful ally on his side. Xerxes had already heard stories of the King of Heroes, a man that God and the original Mu will fear and respect. And having a powerful ally like that would be great. So he would also get an ally to free his sister from her arranged marriage. However, when he found out he had threatened his sister, Xerxes was furious, but managed to remain calm and questioned his sister why. When she had said that she planned his death, Xerxes was very disappointed in his sister and her parents were furious and wanted to take her out of her territory, but Xerxes managed to stop them from doing so. But Xerxes discovered something else problematic. Gilgamesh is the current secretary and carrier of Longinus boosted gear, where the soul of Drake, one of the heavenly dragons, resided, and therefore he could be considered a dragon. Even if he didn't master Drake's power, it would already be extremely strong. Gilgamesh was known for many things. The oldest king in the world, the King of Heroes, is the template on which all the heroes in the world are based. One who collected all the treasures of the world and a man capable of rivaling God and the original Mu. But there was something else that Gilgamesh was known for. Pride. Perhaps the only thing that trumps Gilgamesh's power was his own pride. He would not kneel down and demean anyone, not even the gods who created him. Making the descendant of such a man serve the devils would be tricky. But when Xerxes found out he was the secretary and perhaps a dragon, it made everything more complicated. Dragons are the most powerful beings in the supernatural world. In a world where there are gods and devils, dragons occupy the top. There is a reason why the two strongest existences are dragons. Dragons are beings of pure power, even a low-class dragon could easily defeat a high-class devil. Comparing a low-class dragon to a high-class devil would be like comparing an experienced tiger to a newly grown one. But regardless of how much power dragons have, they are also known to have a lot of personality problems, but there are two quite complicated ones. Greed and pride. These two personality problems are very problematic for everyone. Dragons are beings of extreme greed who are extremely protective with their treasures, killing everyone who tries to steal them. A good example of this is Fafnir, one of the 5 great dragon kings, who is well known for his large treasure collections and being extremely protective of them. But by far the most problematic is pride. Dragons are extremely powerful and proud beings. They are proud of who they are, of their power. They prefer death to throwing away their pride. And if you pair the pride of a dragon with the pride of the king of heroes, that could be catastrophic. But when he met Gilgamesh, it was not as expected. But the king of heroes was a good host and also received them well, even though they invaded his house, always smiling and being polite. Xerxes was surprised when he felt the power of Gilgamesh. If he fought, he would not know if he would win. But what surprised him most was the nature of Gilgamesh's power. Everyone has a trace of themselves placed in their magical aura, something that made them unique and unique to each person. For example, Xerxes was pure destruction thanks to his magic power of destruction. Gilgamesh's could only be described as pure domination. If Xerxes had to describe it, it would be as if something is forcing him to his knees. But what surprised Xerxes most was that Gilgamesh was turning down all his offers and not even listening to them properly. Xerxes was surprised when he felt the power of Gilgamesh. If he fought, he would not know if he would win. Xerxes could feel his wife's anger rising that a human was refusing her husband. Graphia had a sense of superiority over humans. But when his wife threatened Gilgamesh, he couldn't help but be surprised. The descendant of the king of heroes didn't even react, as if that was irrelevant to him. So when he snapped his fingers, all his wife's power just disappeared. This was totally unprecedented. In a single instant all his wife's power disappeared. That was terrifying. His wife wasn't weak, she had the power of the Satan class, but even so all it took was a snap of his fingers for all her power to disappear. It felt like she had lost all her power and became a civilian. That was pretty awesome and scary. But Xerxes couldn't leave it like that. After all, before being the leader of the underworld and the Lucifer, he was a father, brother, and husband, and couldn't let anyone threaten his family. When Xerxes' power broke free from his body, the world seemed to vibrate and shock as Xerxes' power took shape. The power was gigantic. The difference in his level to Graphia's was overwhelmingly great. Although Graphia was a Satan-class devil, it was little compared to her husband's. When Xerxes was born, he was enveloped in an aura of power of destruction that warped everything around him, and only his mother could hold him. Xerxes was born with gigantic demonic power, even by the standards of pure-blood devils, surpassing even the descendants of the ancient Mo, who were known for their great latent demonic power. All his talent, along with his training and the experiences he gained in the civil war of devils, earned him the title of strongest devil and Lucifer after the war. Xerxes is one of the 3 super devils alongside Ajoka, Astaroth and Rezevim Livim Lucifer. 3 devils with such transcendental powers that they had powers capable of rivaling gods from other mythologies. Although Xerxes and Ajoka were far stronger than Rezevim. So powerful that only his position as Mo was worthy of him. Someone so strong that he received the honor of being called one of the 10 strongest beings in the world. He was Xerxes Lucifer, one of the big 4 Satan, a top 10 irregular devil, a super devil. But at all this power Gilgamesh laughed. This was totally surprising to Xerxes. This was the first time anyone had had such a reaction to seeing his power. He didn't even seem surprised. Then Gilgamesh got up and simply walked over to Xerxes without caring for his power, and then put a hand on Xerxes' shoulder.